I sat alone in my Dallas apartment at 2 in the morning, staring at my laptop screen with tears streaming down my face. The company website glowed before my company, my vision, my 15 years of quiet, careful planning, except my name wasn't anywhere on it. David Reynolds, my business partner, had launched without me. The platform we built together, the operational framework I created from scratch, the client trust model I developed through years of trial and error, all of it was there. But I wasn't. The About Us page showed David's face with the title Founder and CEO. There was no mention of Brenda Thompson. It was as if I had never existed. If you've ever trusted someone with your life's work only to watch them erase you from it, you know this particular kind of pain. It's not just betrayal, it's erasure. And at 49 years old, with my retirement savings invested in this company, my aging mother depending on my financial support, and my daughter, Maya, halfway through college, I couldn't afford to fall apart. But that night I did. I'm Brenda Thompson, and this is the story of how I lost everything I built, stayed silent when everyone expected me to scream, and created something so much better that the CEO who once ignored me had to pick up the phone and apologize. If you're watching this video, I want you to stay until the very end, because what I'm about to share isn't just about business betrayal. It's about the quiet power of ethical strategy, the importance of protecting what you build, and why sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming undeniable. But first, let me take you back to where it all began, because you need to understand how someone like me, careful, thorough, responsible, ended up in this nightmare. 3 years before that devastating night, I was working as an operations manager for a mid-sized logistics company in Dallas. I was good at my job. Actually, I was exceptional. I could look at a struggling operational system and see exactly where the inefficiencies were hiding, exactly how to streamline processes, exactly what clients really needed versus what they thought they wanted. For 15 years, I had been developing my own framework in notebooks, on weekends during my lunch breaks. I called it the Integrated Operations Trust Model. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't revolutionary in an obvious way. But it worked. It helped mid-sized businesses manage their operations more efficiently, reduce costs, build genuine client relationships, and scale sustainably. The problem was I didn't have the capital to launch it alone. I didn't have the connections to get in front of investors, and at my age, with my responsibilities, I couldn't risk everything on an unproven venture. I needed a partner. That's when I met David Reynolds at a business networking event in downtown Dallas. He was 42, charismatic, well-connected, and he had that kind of confidence that made people believe in possibilities. When I cautiously mentioned my framework during a conversation, his eyes lit up. "Brenda, this is exactly what the market needs right now," he said, leaning forward with genuine enthusiasm. "I've been looking for something like this. I have investor connections, the capital access, the scaling experience. You have an operational genius. We could build something incredible together." I was flattered. I was also careful. I spent weeks researching David, checking his background, talking to people who had worked with him. Everything checked out. He had successfully scaled 2 previous ventures. He had a strong reputation in the Dallas business community, and everyone I spoke with described him as driven and effective. So I agreed to partner with him. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed, but at the time, I genuinely believed we were building something together. We spent months developing the business plan, refining the platform, preparing for our launch. David handled investor pitches and legal structuring. I focused on the operational framework and client acquisition strategy. My daughter Maya noticed the long hours I was putting in. "Mom, are you sure you're protecting yourself in all this?" she asked me one evening as I worked at the kitchen table, surrounded by business documents. "Honey, I'm being responsible," I assured her. "I've maintained my life insurance to make sure you're secure no matter what happens. I've kept up my health insurance with good preventive care coverage so medical issues don't drain our business capital. I even insisted we get property insurance for the office equipment and digital assets making sure everything is properly valued. But what about the business itself? She pressed. What if something goes wrong? David and I are partners, I said with more confidence than I should have felt. We're building this together. The truth is, I had raised concerns early on. I wanted proper liability insurance to protect us from potential lawsuits. I wanted clear equity agreements in writing. I wanted multiple layers of legal protection. David waved away these concerns with that charming smile of his. Brenda, you're overthinking this. All that insurance and legal stuff is just unnecessary at this stage. We need to stay lean and move fast. Once we get our first major client, we can put all those protections in place. Right now, we need to focus on growth. His words made sense in the moment. Move fast. Stay lean. Focus on growth. These were the mantras I heard everywhere in the startup world. So I pushed my concerns aside and trusted the partnership. 3 months before launch, David suggested we formalize everything with contracts. I was relieved. Finally, we would have proper legal documentation. He said his lawyer was handling it, that I just needed to sign when the documents were ready. The day came when David brought the contracts to my apartment. It was late evening, and I was exhausted from a long day of client calls. He laid several documents on my kitchen table. It's all standard stuff, he said, flipping through pages quickly. Partnership agreement, equity split, intellectual property clauses. My lawyer reviewed everything. We just need signatures so we can move forward with the investor meetings next week. I should have read every word carefully. I should have taken the documents to my own lawyer. I should have slowed down. But I was tired. I was excited about the upcoming launch, and I trusted him. So I skimmed the sections he pointed out, saw my name listed as partner, saw what looked like an equity split, and I signed. That was my first critical mistake. The second came 2 weeks later, when David said we needed to create a new legal entity for tax purposes and investor requirements. It's just a formality, he assured me. Your equity transfers over automatically. The lawyers are handling everything. Again, I trusted him. Again, I didn't insist on seeing the actual documents or having my own legal representation review them. The launch date approached rapidly. I was working 18-hour days, perfecting every aspect of the operational framework, preparing client materials, training our small initial team. David was handling the business side, investor communications, legal filings, financial structuring. We barely saw each other during those final weeks. He was always rushing to meetings, taking calls private, working late at the office while I worked from home. I thought we were both just overwhelmed with the intensity of launching a new venture. 2 days before launch, David called me. Brenda, I need you to handle something tomorrow. We've got a major systems integration issue that only you can solve. I'll be dealing with some last-minute investor concerns. Can you spend tomorrow in the back office making sure everything runs smoothly? Of course, I said. This was my strength. This was what I did best. The next day, I worked alone. In the office, buried in operational details, making sure every system was perfect for launch. I didn't attend the investor meeting. I didn't see the press releases going out. I was focused on making sure the foundation was solid. That evening, I received a text from David. Launch went perfectly. Great investor response. You did amazing work on the systems. Let's celebrate tomorrow. I went home exhausted but proud. We had done it. The platform was live. Our vision was real. The next morning, I woke up to congratulatory messages from former colleagues who had seen the launch announcement. I smiled, still half asleep, and opened my laptop to look at the website. That's when my world shattered. The company website showed David as sole founder. The press release quoted him exclusively about his innovative platform. The investor deck, which someone had accidentally sent me, listed him as the sole equity holder. The legal entity was registered under his name alone. I called him immediately, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. David, what is this? Why isn't my name on anything? There was a pause. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Brenda, we need to talk. Can you come to the office?" I drove there in a daze. When I arrived, David was sitting in what was supposed to be our shared office, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Look, Brenda, you did great work on the operational side," he began. "Really great work. But the investors were concerned about having two founders with equal equity. They wanted a clear, single decision maker. And legally, because of how we structured the entity transition, your equity didn't transfer over. My lawyer explained this would happen, but I thought he communicated it to you." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "You're telling me I have no equity in this company, the company I spent 15 years developing, the framework I created?" "The framework was developed collaboratively," he said carefully. "You contributed operational insights, but I brought the business structure, the capital, the investor relationships. Without my involvement, none of this would exist. I'm prepared to offer you a generous consultant fee for your initial work, and possibly a position as operations director if you're interested, but the ownership structure is finalized." I felt like I was underwater, sounds muffled, reality distorted. "You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? All those rushed contracts, the entity transition you said was just a formality, keeping me out of investor meetings." He had the decency to look away. "It's just business, Brenda. Nothing personal. This is how startups work. Things move fast. Structures change. I really do appreciate everything you contributed, but we need to move forward now." I left that office in a fog. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten to sue. I simply walked out, got in my car, and drove home. That night, alone in my apartment, the weight of what happened crashed over me. My 15 years of careful planning, gone. My retirement savings invested, and now worthless. My vision, stolen and rebranded. I thought about suing. I researched lawyers who specialized in intellectual property theft and partnership disputes. But every consultation told me the same thing. Without clear documentation, without proof of my contributions, without proper contracts protecting my intellectual property, I had a weak case that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of my life. I thought about going public, telling everyone what David had done, but I had no proof beyond my word against his. And he had the press releases, the investor relationships, the official company documentation, all supporting his version of events. I thought about giving up entirely, finding another corporate job, accepting that some people just get away with theft. But at 3 a.m, sitting at my kitchen table with my mother's photograph watching me from the shelf, something inside me shifted. My mother had raised me alone after my father died when I was 12. She worked 2 jobs, never complained, never made excuses. She taught me that dignity wasn't about what people did to you. It was about what you did in response. I thought about Maya, my daughter, watching how I handled this moment. What lesson did I want to teach her? When someone steals from you, you just accept it? That at 49, you're too old to rebuild. Are the only options rage or resignation? No. I decided on something that night that confused everyone around me. I decided to stay silent, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. I didn't call David to yell at him. I didn't post angry messages on social media. I didn't tell mutual contacts what happened. I simply went quietly, and I started building something better. The first thing I did was address my own stability. I couldn't create anything new if I was in financial chaos. I carefully reviewed all my insurance policies, making sure my family was genuinely protected. I activated proper disability insurance coverage planning, realizing that my ability to think clearly and work consistently was my most valuable asset. I couldn't afford to be derailed by a health crisis or accident. I reviewed my policies for grace period clauses, finding reassurance that if I hit temporary cash flow problems during this uncertain time, I wouldn't immediately lose my coverage. This wasn't paranoia. This was the difference between responsible planning and the reckless, move fast and break things mentality that had just destroyed my first venture. Then I went back to my original framework and asked myself a hard question. What if I could build this better? Not just good enough, but genuinely superior in every way that mattered. For the next 6 weeks, I barely left my apartment. I redesigned my operational framework from the ground up, this time, incorporating everything I had learned from the betrayal. I studied every single insurance exclusion clause I could find, understanding not just what protection covered, but what it explicitly did not cover, and why informed consent around those limitations mattered so much in business relationships. I built in an inflation protection clause mentality into my pricing model, recognizing that growth without adjustment for changing economic conditions was an illusion. I included business interruption insurance thinking from day one, designing systems that could maintain income stability even during unforeseen disruptions. Most importantly, I added a waiver of premium clause approach to my client relationships, acknowledging that real life involves setbacks and building flexibility into agreements without shame or penalty. My new framework wasn't just operationally superior, it was ethically differentiated. Every part of it was designed with transparency, with protection, with long-term sustainability rather than short-term flash. I worked with a lawyer this time, a good one, to properly protect my intellectual property before I talked to anyone about it. I filed copyrights. I created detailed documentation. I built legal protection first, business second. My daughter noticed the change in me. "Mom, you seem different," Maya said one Sunday morning as I worked at the kitchen table. Calmer, more focused. "I'm done trusting shortcuts," I told her. "I'm building something that can't be stolen because it's protected properly, and I'm building it on principles that matter, not just profit, but ethics." "Are you going to compete directly with David?" "I'm not competing with David," I said. "I'm competing with the version of myself who thought I could skip the hard parts. The legal protection, the proper insurance, the detailed contracts. I thought those things were just paperwork getting in the way of real work. Now I understand they are real work." 2 months after, David launched his platform. I quietly began reaching out to potential clients. Not David's clients. That would have been messy legally. New clients in adjacent markets who needed exactly what I was offering. My pitch was simple. I offer operational efficiency with complete transparency about limitations, proper protection against foreseeable risks, and ethical relationships built on documented agreements. It wasn't sexy, it wasn't fast, but it was solid. My first client was a mid-sized medical supply company in Houston. The owner, Patricia Chen, was a 62-year-old woman who had built her business over 30 years. "I like you talk about what can go wrong," Patricia told me during our initial meeting. "Every other consultant I've talked to promises me the moon and glosses over the risks. You're telling me exactly what your framework covers, what it doesn't cover, and what additional protections I should consider. That's refreshing." I learned the hard way that honest. "Limitations build more trust than exaggerated promises," I said. Patricia became my first client. Within 3 months, her operational efficiency improved by 37%, her client satisfaction scores increased, and she had clear documentation of every process change we implemented. She referred me to 2 other business owners. They referred me to 3 more. Within 6 months, I had 12 solid clients, all of them appreciating the transparency, the ethical framework, the proper protection built into every agreement. I wasn't growing as fast as David. His platform was getting press coverage, attracting flashy clients, raising additional investment rounds. People in the Dallas business community talked about his meteoric rise, but I was growing steadily, sustainably, profitably, and I slept well at night. That's when the cracks in David's foundation started showing. I heard it first through a former colleague who called me out of concern. "Brenda, I don't know if you're still in touch with David Reynolds, but his company is having serious problems. A client is threatening to sue them because their data got breached, and apparently they had no liability insurance. The whole thing is a mess." I asked careful questions and learned that David's obsession with growth and lean operations meant he had never put proper protection in place. No liability insurance, no business interruption coverage, no proper legal review of client contracts. When the data breach happened, something that could happen to any technology platform, David's company had no protection. They were personally liable for potential damage. The legal exposure was enormous. Then came the operational failures. Without a solid framework, without the deep operational thinking I had spent 15 years developing, David's platform and started having systemic problems. Client implementations were failing. Systems were breaking. The flashy exterior was collapsing because the foundation was never properly built. I watched from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a kind of sad recognition. This was what happened when you prioritized speed over substance, growth over stability, shortcuts over ethics. 3 months later, I was at a regional business conference in Austin when someone approached me during the networking hours. "Brenda Thompson? I'm Elaine Carter. I'm the CEO of Vanguard Solutions. We're the parent firm that invested in David Reynolds' platform." I recognized her name. She was the executive who had approved of the major investment round that allowed David to scale so quickly. "I've been reviewing internal reports on our portfolio. Companies," Elaine continued. "Your name kept appearing in the early documentation for Reynolds' platform, but then disappeared. I wanted to understand what happened." I chose my words carefully. "I contributed to the initial operational framework. The partnership didn't work out. I moved on to build my own company." Elaine studied me for a moment. "Would you be willing to have coffee tomorrow morning? I'd like to understand more about your current work." The next morning, over coffee in a quiet hotel restaurant, I told Elaine my story, not with anger or victimhood, but with facts and honesty. I showed her the documentation of my original framework. I showed her the copyrights and intellectual property protections I had filed before David's launch. I showed her the client results I was achieving with my new company. "Why aren't you sure?" Elaine asked directly. "Because winning a lawsuit wouldn't have given me back my time or my work," I said. "It would have made me bitter and poor. Instead, I chose to build something better, something properly protected, something ethical." Elaine was quiet for a long time. "Reynolds is facing serious operational and legal problems. The framework he's using, your framework, is breaking down because he doesn't actually understand the deeper operational thinking behind it. He copied the surface without understanding the substance." "That's usually what happens with theft," I said. "You can steal the blueprint, but you can't steal the expertise." "Our firm is reviewing whether to continue our investment," Elaine said. "The liability exposure from the data breach, the operational failures, the lack of proper insurance and legal protection, it's all reflecting very poorly on our due diligence process." 2 weeks after that conversation, David called me for the first time since our last meeting. His voice was different, strained, desperate. "Brenda, we need to talk. Things are complicated right now, and I think maybe we made some mistakes in how we structured the partnership. I'd like to discuss bringing you back on as a co-founder with proper equity." I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said, very calmly, "David, I'm not interested in being brought back into a company with massive liability exposure, operational problems, and a foundation built on theft. I have my own company now. It's doing very well. Brenda, please. I know I made mistakes. I was just trying to move fast, to build something big. I never meant—" "You meant exactly what you did," I interrupted. "You saw an opportunity to take my work and claim it as yours. You did that deliberately. The only reason you're calling now is because it's falling apart and you need me to fix it." "I'll give you 50% equity," he said desperately. "Full co-founder status, public acknowledgement of your contributions." "I don't want 50% of a failing company with legal problems and angry clients," I said. "I want 100% of a company built on integrity, which is what I have." I hung up and sat quietly in my office, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not vindication, but simply peace. I had made the right choice. 1 week later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered to hear a woman's voice. "Ms. Thompson, this is Elaine Carter. I'm calling because I owe you an apology." I was genuinely surprised. An apology? Our firm invested in David Reynolds' company based on due diligence that should have been much more thorough. We should have questioned why an operational framework that sophisticated came from someone with no operations background. We should have looked deeper into the early partnership structure. We should have noticed that the person who actually understood the work had been pushed out. "These things happen," I said carefully. "No, they shouldn't," Elaine said firmly, "especially not when they happen to women of color who are often systematically erased from their own contributions. I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I should have known better." Her honesty was unexpected and appreciated. "I want to make this right," Elaine continued. "First, I want to formally acknowledge your intellectual property in our documentation. Second, I want to explore whether Vanguard Solutions could invest in your company instead. We need operational excellence backed by ethical leadership. You've demonstrated both." I took a breath, processing this turn of events. "I appreciate that, Ms. Carter. I really do. But I need to know your investment won't compromise my principles. I've built this company on transparency, proper protection, and ethical relationships. I won't sacrifice that for capital." "I wouldn't ask you to," Elaine said. "In fact, that's exactly why we're interested. We're tired of investing in companies that prioritize speed over sustainability. We want to support businesses that do things the right way, even if it's slower." Over the next 3 months, Elaine and I worked together on a partnership structure. Every step was documented. Every agreement was reviewed by independent lawyers. Every protection was properly in place. The investment from Vanguard Solutions allowed me to scale responsibly. I hired a small team of operational experts. I expanded into new markets. I grew my client base from 12 to 47 companies. But the most important growth wasn't in numbers. It was in the model I was creating that proved ethical business, proper protection, and transparent relationships could succeed without compromising integrity. 6 months after Elaine's call, David's company officially shut down. The liability issues, operational failures, and investor withdrawal made it unsustainable. I heard through mutual contacts that David took a job with a different firm, no longer running his own company. I felt no satisfaction in his failure. I only felt gratitude that I had chosen a different path. My business today serves 63 clients across 8 states. My daughter Maya graduated from college and joined my company as operations manager, bringing fresh perspectives to the framework I created. My mother is proud, healthy, and properly supported. More importantly, every client agreement I sign includes clear documentation of what we promise, what we don't promise, and what protections are in place. Every team member I hire is treated with respect and proper compensation. Every business decision is made with long-term sustainability in mind, not short-term flash. I still see the occasional article about successful startups that scaled rapidly by cutting corners, ignoring protections, prioritizing growth over everything else. And I think about what I would tell my younger self, the woman who trusted too easily and didn't protect what she built. I would tell her that ethical planning outlasts shortcuts every single time. That protection isn't pessimism, it's respect for your future. That understanding insurance clauses, legal agreements, and proper documentation isn't boring paperwork. It's the foundation that allows real creativity and innovation to survive. I would tell her that silence, when intentional, can be strategic strength. That you don't always have to scream to be heard. Sometimes the loudest statement is simply refusing to compromise your values while building something undeniable. Most of all, I would tell her that at 49, at 55, at 62, you are not too old to rebuild. You are not past your prime. You are at the stage of life where wisdom meets experience, where you finally understand that sustainable success is worth more than flashy failure. The business world loves stories about young founders who disrupt everything and scale overnight. But there's another story that matters just as much. The story of people who build carefully, who protect what they create, who recover from betrayal not with bitterness but with better strategy. That's my story. And maybe in some way it's yours too. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever had an idea stolen from you? Have you ever trusted someone who erased your contribution? Have you ever felt like you were too old, too cautious, too ethical to succeed in a world that rewards shortcuts? I want to hear your stories. Leave a comment below and tell me about a time you were underestimated, unprotected, or pushed aside. Tell me how you responded. Tell me what you learned. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that integrity has power and ethical business can win, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel, because there are so many more stories like this. Stories about real people building real businesses the right way. Stories about recovery and resilience. Stories about the quiet victories that last. Remember, you don't win by being the loudest. You don't win by cutting the most corners. You don't win by stealing from others or compromising your values. You win by being wiser, by building better, by protecting what matters and refusing to let betrayal define you. That kind of victory doesn't make headlines, but it changes lives. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm Brenda Thompson, and I'm proof that it's never too late to rebuild, it's never wrong to do things ethically, and sometimes the best response to being erased is simply becoming impossible to ignore. Subscribe for more stories of business resilience, ethical success, and the power of building something that lasts. Share your experiences in the comments. And remember, your ideas, your work, your contribution matters. Protect it, value it, and never let anyone convince you otherwise. With respect and hope for your journey, this is my story. What's yours?